Okay, hang on. Okay. Hello there, it's Susie Walker here from Psychologies Magazine. I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Laura Mucha, who has written this fantastic book, We Need to Talk About Love. And I've just been telling Laura that I think this is a bestseller, if it hasn't already become a bestseller. This is the book. I just started to read it. I'm halfway through. And I've already texted it to about 3 or 4 of my friends saying, oh my God, we need to read this. I've actually told my boyfriend, oh my goodness, I'm not sure we have a future. You have to read this book, which is not good. So Laura, I'm so delighted to have you here today. Tell me, what has inspired you to write this book?
Well, I grew up with my mum and grandma and grandfather, and then my grandfather died when I was 11. So I was left with my grandma and mum, who were amazing, but they weren't obviously in a romantic relationship. And so I just didn't have one to observe. And so at the time I thought that I didn't have one to observe, and that was the issue. But also, obviously, I was bereaved. And as a child, if you lose someone you love, that's a big deal, because, you know, lots of different theories, but you might come to associate love with loss, for example. So I found myself interrogating everyone I met, basically, including my friends' parents, and saying, oh, hi, have you ever thought about cheating? Or do you share your money? Or have you ever thought about divorce? And then eventually I decided what I would do is record my conversations when I interviewed a 95-year-old Argentinian farmer who'd been married for 75 years. And then I researched what came up, because a lot of what was coming up needed research to be understood, because sometimes I think we live lives through a lens that impacts everything, you know, and I needed research to dig deeper, and also to ask some pretty statistical questions, like, is cheating common, or how long does grief last, you know, those kinds of questions that actually there is data on.
So let's just start there, because I think that's how you start the book, which is, so your book is all about investigating love, not just our opinions about it or our experience about it, but what's so wonderful about it, you're taking us through lots of different case histories and stories, people who you chatted to along the way, who've been very truthful and honest with you about perhaps they have cheated or their real opinions. So it's a kind of almost like a snapshot of seeing into people's the reality behind love and romance and lust. It's so great. And the book starts off about people cheating. So tell us, do people cheat? Is it more common than we think?
Yeah, it is. And I thought really carefully about where to start. And I wanted to start with infidelity, because I thought it was a great way of showing just how powerful early love is, or lust, compared to long-term, much calmer love. And I think one of the issues with cheating is that there's an unfair comparison being made, or that it's like cocaine or heroin, like fighting against lovely warm cuddles. You know, it's not a fair match. People do cheat. It's really hard to get precise numbers on it, because people don't want to admit to it. So in one study, 30% admitted initially, and then after 6 months of therapy, another 30% confessed. So we know that the numbers that we get should be taken as a minimum. And also, people don't want to admit because they're worried about being caught or being judged. And there's a lot of judgment about it, even though it happens quite a lot. So there's a big range. And the research has found up to 70% of women, up to 72% of men cheat.
Wow. So is there anything, you know, when you've done all your research, do you think there is such a good thing as good monogamy, you know, that, you know, love that we should be faithful to each other, that, you know, is that the secret to a happy marriage? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or that, you know, because it kind of makes me go blotchy, the thought of, you know, someone cheating on me. But then from, you know, tales in your book, people have stayed together despite being cheating. So is it necessary for a relationship for a marriage to kind of last for 25, 50 years?
I think it's hard to generalize because it depends whether that marriage began when people were teens. So, you know, statistically, based on all marriages in England and Wales in 1976, women were 53% likely to divorce within 30 years if they married age 20 or under, but that dropped to 7% if they married in their 40s. So I think there is something about, you know, when that relationship starts and whether you've, you know, had some sexual experiences or not, and whether you've done some of your growing. I think also people have different sex drives. People have different needs for new experiences. So there's a lot of independent factors, I think, that go on. I think open relationships, like the different options, so whether that's swinging or gay non-monogamy or open relationships or polyamory, I think they're all valid options, but it's just a really personal decision. And there are disadvantages and advantages to both. And I think that's really often missed. I think it's really easy to be in a monogamous relationship and think, you know what, it would, if only we had an open relationship, everything would be fine. But every scenario has disadvantages. So the research on consensual non-monogamy, which is not a very catchy phrase, is pretty robust. There are disadvantages. Like when therapists across the US were asked why their clients that were swingers stopped swinging, they said it was jealousy was a main issue. They were worried about emotions developing, and also stigma. You know, there's massive amounts of stigma, even though a US study found that 21% of people have tried non-monogamy. So, and then, you know, I think monogamy can make you feel very safe and loving, but then it misses out on safe and secure, I mean, but it misses out on that drug-like high that you get in early relationships. But there is research that says there's stuff you could do to zhuzh up your sex life. Like there is, but you've got to have a growth mindset about it. You've got to like put some effort in basically and not think, oh, well, that's it, we're doomed, we're never going to have sex again.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's also a piece that you mention a lot. So your growth mindset is important. There's also a piece around, which I struggle with, is around vulnerability. Is about being, you know, when you're, so you might not want to say, you know, it might be you're at the beginning of a relationship. It might be when you're 5 years into a relationship of, you know, oh, you don't seem to desire me anymore, you know, and you don't want to hear the answer, so you don't bring it up, and you know, it's that kind of intense vulnerability. So what I was thinking about when I was reading it was like, how do we get the courage to be vulnerable? For me, it seems to be about, to have a healthy, happy relationship, it's about how willing we are to be vulnerable in a relationship. Or that's my story anyway. Well, how do we learn how to do that?
I think some people, particularly people who might have an avoidant attachment pattern, so idealize independence and feel suffocated in relationships, and don't necessarily connect with their emotions that much, they will struggle with vulnerability. But then there are others, like those who have an anxious attachment pattern, who are often seen as needy or clingy, and essentially are soothed with being close to their partner and very sensitive to threats. If anything, they're too comfortable with vulnerability. You know, being excessively vulnerable is their go-to, because at some point in their lives, they've learned that being excessively vulnerable or like sensitive to threats and asking for help is the best strategy for them. So I think some people need to develop being vulnerable, and some need to develop the sense that they can cope on their own and they don't need someone else to do anything for them. In terms of the vulnerability thing, because that's definitely what I had to work on big time. I think therapy can help, but it really depends, I think, on the quality of the relationship with the therapist. I think education, so, you know, just knowing some things about the importance of vulnerability, or what attachment pattern you might have, or what your lens might be, like how you see everything. Like without a therapist, without doing anything else, just even being aware of that as a possible factor is, I think, incredibly important and should be taught in schools. And there's also, you know, a growing field of how you become aware of how you are. So for me, I was very not happy being vulnerable at all, and really liked to you know, be fine. My go-to was I'm fine, basically. I'll make jokes. I'm the positive one. And I break up with everyone. That's my way of being. And then actually, you know, I was hit by a car when I was 29 and I was left virtually bedbound for a few years. And I was in hospital and I wouldn't let anyone come with me because I was fine. And then actually I learned that I wasn't fine, and it would have been better if someone had come with me, and that independence and thinking that you are not vulnerable is, I think, flawed, because I think all humans are vulnerable. I think just some of them don't want to get in touch with it, but I think that we're all vulnerable, and I think vulnerability is necessary for an intimate relationship. But I also think vulnerability it can be unhelpful.
I think that's kind of almost a live example of so I'm coming it through my lens, which is probably avoidant. We were talking about attachment theory, and I'm probably more on the avoidant side, well, very avoidant. And so I think that everybody needs to get in touch with their vulnerability. But what you're saying is actually if you're very anxious, then you're probably kind of processing all the time. So, and it's about being able, you know, we talk about secure. Do you believe that we can change our attachment style and become more secure?
Yeah, there is a bit of an academic debate about this, because some people think that like the idea of earning security is actually seen where people had really, really loving upbringings, so they had that kind of really solid base. But my current position is I think people can change, and also I think it's really important to have hope. And I don't know what my attachment was growing up. I've now done my adult attachment interview for the next book on attachment theory. And I know that I am secure, which is great. But my personal sense is that I wasn't always, because I did break up with everyone. I did feel like this kind of here, like oh, I need some space. And so, yeah, it's I think you can earn security, and some, it also depends on the attachment researcher. Some researchers say that one of the best things you can do if you're insecure, so anxious or avoidant or the other type, which we haven't gone into, is to get in a relationship with someone secure, because over time they kind of lift you up a little, I guess. So let's imagine I'm anxious and you're avoidant, and I'm like, where are you, Susie? Where are you, Susie? Where are you, Susie? I need you. I need you. If you're avoidant, you'll be like, oh, I need some space, which will make me more anxious. Whereas if you're secure and I'm like, where are you, Susie? Where are you, Susie? Where are you, Susie? You'd be like, I'm here. And I go, oh, okay, fine. Why was I worried? And then that happens over time, and then eventually I just know that you're there, and I kind of amend my understanding of relationships. So yeah, but I don't. But that doesn't mean, you know, that doesn't mean that if you're in a relationship where one is avoidant or one is anxious, or there isn't a secure person, it doesn't mean you're doomed. It just means you have to take. It's going to be a lot of work, because otherwise you're in a chase withdrawal pattern, which isn't great.
Yeah. I mean, and again, you explain that really well in the book, which is again, as you said, I think it's something that we should learn about in schools, and to educate ourselves and understand, you know, when you have that, oh, get away from me kind of sense. Sometimes I get being very independent. You know, it's not because the person is not the right person for me. It's just my kind of avoidant style kicking in. You have interviewed lots of people in this book. Are there any particular stories that have really stayed with you and that have kind of transformed the way you think about love?
Yeah, one of the ones that is a little bit depressing is I was in Iceland, the country, not the shop, and I was in a cafe, and a lady, I was carrying loads of books about love, because I mean, all I did for 10 years was read about love. I mean, I still do. And she came up to me and was talking about like what I was reading, and I said I was writing this book, and she asked if I could interview her, and I said sure. And then we sat down, and she told me that she'd been kidnapped as a child for 8 years. When she was mum and youth, when her captor enticed another child, she came out of herself, and it was only by seeing the potential of it happening to someone else that she realized quite how awful it was, and that the most important thing in life is connection with humans. And I think there's something so like indescribably powerful about hearing that from someone who was starved for all human connection in 8 incredibly formative years. And I think I'm definitely susceptible to this. I get carried away with work, or, you know, to-do lists, or, you know, cleaning, tidying, whatever it is. And actually, I really think that what makes this life valuable and meaningful is connections with other people. And I think the more work we do and the more understanding we have of others, the better those connections can be. So, yeah, that was a game changer. Even though, you know, she's not featured that widely, that massively in the book, because, you know, I couldn't really.
I read that book though. Yeah, I read that story and was incredibly moved. You know, the idea, and also that she's living and breathing and standing still despite going through such a traumatic experience, and was able to talk to you about it. I mean, that's incredible too. In terms of you know, wisdom that you could share with us, if you could just share maybe 1 or 2 pieces of wisdom. I mean, I get what you're saying about connection is that I agree with you. Connection is the most important thing for me anyway. But what in terms of getting that connection, people who need to learn how to connect better, what tips could you give us about how to do that? You know, in all the research that you've done, a really easy win, a love hack. What do we need to do that would help us to connect more, or to ease the kind of the wheels of love?
I think probably the first thing is something that I did not understand. Like, I really believed it was a matter of finding the right person. I didn't necessarily believe there was a one, but I thought it was very important that you made an you know, I really thought that the choice was fundamental, and didn't really look at myself. And I think that is built and not found. You know, the kind of relationship, the people that I interviewed in their 90s and their 80s, they didn't say, you know what, I nailed it because I picked that right one person. They said, you know, I'm still with my wife who has dementia and has no idea who I am, because we've spent this whole lifetime together and she's done so much for me, and our relationship is so much about the time we've spent together and how we have shared values and helped each other grow. So I think that love is built, not found, is really important. And that kind of links in with expectation, you know, that I don't think relationships are easy. I think they're easier for some and harder for others, but on the whole, I don't think they're easy. And I think the kind of love that makes relationship last is love. Research is very robust. You know, unless you do some very big growth mindset stuff, your sex life don't have to decrease. Like, it's happening across the world. You know, I think, so I think, yeah, I think it's hard work and it's unglamorous, but I personally think it's really, really worth it. I also think that the sort of love that makes long-term relationships last requires kind of shared values. And so I think it's valuable not to think about, if you're single, who you want in a partner is, I want someone who's tall or who likes hiking or whatever, but to think about really, like, if you were at your funeral, like, what is it that what do you care about? If you won the lottery, what would you spend it on? What do you really care about? And when people around the world were asked this in a study of 10,047 people across 37 countries on 6 continents, they said kindness and understanding. And I think that's right. I think, what's the point of going? And I've done loads of events where people have come up to me and said, you know what, I chose someone because I thought money was important. And, you know, you might think, obviously you don't want to be in absolute poverty, but if money is important, why is that? Is it because money represents security or whatever it is? But like, I think kindness and understanding is non-negotiable. But kindness in particular, I think kindness is non-negotiable. Yeah. I would also say, in early stages, you are on drugs. Don't make big decisions until the drugs wear off. That is what I would say.
Yeah, because when you fall in love, it's like crack cocaine, isn't it? And then just wait until you start, that wears off. How long does it take to wear off? Is it a couple of years?
It depends what they're measuring. Like, they've come up with things like 18 months to 32 years, depending on what they're measuring. But kind of a general sense is approximately 2 years. But, you know, in that first, but I think it varies from person to person. I also think, like, for example, if you live in different countries and you only see each other, and I interviewed people in this situation, if you only see each other, you know, a couple of weekends or not very often, then it is really easy for that to last longer, because you're not actually, you know, in the humdrum when you can't see anyone. I think it can make it last longer. But yeah, it is. We see similar levels of serotonin as those seen in obsessive compulsive disorder. People have been put in fMRI scanners in coke and coke and opiates as those who had recently fallen in love. You know, it's the brain's reward system. Basically, you know, rats have chosen death just to keep getting that high. They've opted for starvation when they could choose, you know, food or brain's reward system. It's really, really powerful. Don't trust it. It might be right, but it might not. It might not.
Now, I know that you're married. So has all the research that you've done help you believe in love and you know, find your own, I mean, I want to say happily ever after, but you know, to make the commitment to somebody? How has it affected you personally?
I don't think I'd be married if I hadn't written the book. It's been, I mean, totally game changing. Like, I was definitely a commitment phobe, and I would always sort of be looking for reasons to doubt. Almost, I would look for them, and it's all just sort of melted away, really. I think partly because I've learned that's a lot to do with me and not to do with him. I'm better at arguing. Like, you know, before I would be because I was fundamentally a bit stressed out by commitment. I didn't have the incentive to have a good argument. I would just be like, no, and now I'm like, okay, no, you know what, this is really annoying, but at a base level, I know that I want to be in this relationship in the long term, so I'm not going to be such a pain, basically. Unreasonable humor. It's also, you know, so when my husband proposed, we were in Australia in the middle of nowhere, and he proposed on a beach, and I felt like so physically vexed, like, you know, like this suffocation, like, and I almost couldn't say yes. In fact, I don't even think I did say yes. And he went, "Is that a yes?" And I was like, ah. And I think that it was really awkward. We were in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't even like dilute it by being with friends. And I was able to say to him, "I'm really sorry. This isn't what you would hope for, someone you just proposed to. This is not about you. This is my avoidant attachment pattern having a freak out." And so I just waited it out, and it was really horrible. And I felt really anxious. And if I hadn't known this, written this book, and I'd called pretty much anyone, particularly many of my avoidant friends, they would have gone, "You should ditch him, right? Like, that's not a good sign." But I waited it out, and now there's none of that. I'm really happy. I love him, and I want to be with him until one of us dies. And I think, you know, obviously, you know, that's a long time away, and we might not achieve it, but I hope we will. But I needed to get through that. And I think, you know, if I hadn't written this book, I probably would have said no and walked away. I would have spoken to some people who would have said, "That's a really bad sign," because it does sound like a really bad sign. But actually, it's not. I would have had that reaction to anyone who had proposed. That was all me.
Yeah. I mean, brilliant. Again, it's just the self-awareness, and it's an education piece, isn't it? It's about learning all about these things so we can become more self-aware of our own patterns, but also, you know, the kind of, when you fall in love, it feels like crack cocaine and you feel like you're on drugs. All of those things that you've written about, everyone needs to know. Everyone needs to go and buy this book for their best friends, for their single friends, for their not that being with someone is the answer. But if you do want to be with someone, or perhaps want to have a partner in your life, to learn all that you've written about in this book is going to be so, I mean, you know, I'm 52 and I was reading through it thinking, this is fantastic. Why didn't I know this? I'm really good. So Laura, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for writing this book. And I'm going to give it to everybody, all of my single girlfriends, all of my girlfriends, all of my, to my boyfriend as well. And hopefully he can help me and forgive me for being so avoidant. And hopefully we'll move on. I'll invite you to the wedding.
Can I just say briefly, there are advantages to being avoidant and anxious, right? Like we've given them a bit of a, oh, what? Oh, how do I leave?